Good evening, friends. My name is Lejo Lucas, and I'm here to talk about, to give a home presentation about doping in sports. So we all have a general idea of what doping is. Doping is something which we associate with drugs, which we associate, at least I associate, with something which is immoral, unethical, in terms of sports is concerned. So let's see what the definition of doping is as per USDA and as per generally what doping is all about. Okay. The use of drugs to enhance sports performance, which is banned by the athletic competitors, can be termed as doping. Anything which is illegally increasing your performance in terms of, it can be through injections, it can be through pills, any sort of an alter medication can be defined as doping. And why do you think that doping is illegal or it's completely banned in many places or in many international sporting events? I personally think since if one person uses doping as a means to have a better performance, that means indirectly other honest athletes are definitely going to face a consequence about that. They are the ones, the hard workers are the ones which would end up on the losing side in spite of giving their best to the best of their knowledge. Going forward, what are the substances used for doping? It's not just drugs, and drugs in a lot of way it can be much different, like hormones, marijuana, and anabolic steroids, narcotics, analgesics, sedatives, painkillers, stimulants, and blood doping. The list goes on forever. Hormones are basically you know uh, I have seen I'm pretty sure you must also have seen people inject themselves with hormone. They get better mass, they get better physique, and their stamina increases considerably. A lot of pros and cons associated with injecting themselves with hormones, and so is steroids. uh, Let me tell you this. In 1999, a new agency was formed, a World Anti-Doping Agency. Their main goal was to regulate the use of drugs and how these policies were being, countered and dealt with in different sports organizations and governments around the world. Refinement in drugs testing have improved the ability to detect and doping violations, resulting in increased number of reported violations over recent years. Next comes marijuana. I know in U.S. there are many states which is legal, where marijuana is considered legal. There have been instances where the players have been questioned about the authenticity of their use of marijuana whenever they were tested. All they had to say was that marijuana is being used for recreational purposes. Medical studies medical studies have found out that marijuana can ease out stress. Are they act as painkillers basically. There have been instances where marijuana has been used uh, in the wars. We know how marijuana was being used in wars where the soldiers were quite injured, and they used marijuana and weed as a form of a big painkiller, which helped them a lot. But so is the case with here in sports. Also, they use marijuana, which I don't think it's personally right to do. Then there comes analogic steroids, narcotics. That is the higher end of whatever we were talking about. Analgesics, sedatives. Sedatives are mostly used for sports, which is maybe like archery, which needs a lot of concentration, which needs a lot of stability. Wherein one point of using sedatives is that your heart rate really goes down. When your heart rate really goes down, your body movement is close to absolute zero. There is very minimal body movement, which would definitely help in in their concentration. There are, of course, then we always also spoke about painkillers, stimulants, and blood doping. Painkillers are something which they use like for wrestling, for athletes who wrestle a lot, who have a lot of physical pain and who have to endure a lot of pain. They eventually use those painkillers to subside their pain. I mean, I know there is over the counter painkillers like Tylenol or Excedrin, which I don't think would be considered doping, but yes, anything which is consumed and in excess amount, which is more than recommended by the physician, is considered can be taken as doping. You cannot expect to consume like 10 to 15 capsules of Tylenol and behave normally. Next question arises: why do athletes use drugs? Okay, first point which I've mentioned here is using drugs increases their performances, their whether it be their physical performance, their emotionally state of mind. They have a higher, better concentration for that particular time than if they were not to use those drugs. With those drugs, they have shown considerable amount of increase in performances. I mean, all these drugs also comes with their own flaws. They have their own problems associated with it. The side effects is really terrible to go through them. Uh, we talk about better stamina and endurance. Decreases the pain in certain cases. As it's not certain, it's pretty much in every case there is very less of pain as compared to the ones who do not use drugs. The mass gain. There is a very decreased lose of body mass when you consistently use these drugs for your own benefit. The energy gain. You feel like a Hulk. You feel like unbeatable. That is what people quote after using those drugs and after giving their performance. If an athlete can run 100 meter in 8 seconds, I mean, or that's very rare. If an athlete can run 100 meters in like 10 seconds with these supplemental drugs, which is not allowed by doping, I've seen there's a considerable increase in their performance. They tend to perform faster, higher, and they last longer. What are the harmful effects of doping? Okay, in short, I've mentioned a couple of points. Those are infertility, enlargement of breasts, cancer, liver damage. It deals with depression. It also responsible for shrinking of your testicles, your hypertension, strokes, heart attacks, high blood pressure, and abnormal menstrual cycle for women. Apart from these are just minor points I just brushed upon. There are many of them which people have to go through during these, like if you use considerable amount of this. Okay, if you've seen drugs like Adderall, right, which has been prescribed only for ADHD conditions. However, they use it to improve their concentration, to maintain calm, to increase the concentration. And there are a lot of them which is before any sporting event, it is completely banned to use those. Okay, reasons for deviance. Okay, as expected out of an athlete, they are expected to win. They have always have high expectations from the nation, from the crowd, from their fans. So they don't want to let down them. They don't want to lose. They don't want to end up in the losing side. They always want to be up against anybody, and they want to win for them and as well as for their country. It gives them immense pleasure. It's a matter of pride, and yes, of course, it is a matter of pride for them to win for the nation. Who does not want their son or their daughter to win a big Olympic title? And for them, for the players themselves, sometimes they're subjected in such a manner that they're willing to take any step to win that title. They don't see that if it's a right path, if it's a wrong path. They don't see if it's morally correct to adapt that step, and they just go with the flow with it, and they know that okay, it increases their performance. Why not go for it? And they they've been using that, and see, it says the winner is always the king. If you're not being caught, you're all the king. You're the king. If you end up on the losing side, if you end up being tested for your drugs, then and it's game over. I would say it's completely game over. We were talking about the pride to the society when the athlete himself is being pressurized by his coach and others to improve on his performances. He is subjected to use unethical means to reach his goal. He knows that that is completely wrong, but then he still chooses to take that path because he wants to win. Okay, how do tests are conducted? Blood collection and sample collection, like sample collection for urine, they're being that's how it's being taken. I have an interesting video to show you about how samples are being taken.
For testing. The location is typically what an athlete will put on their whereabouts filing and contains your 3-month calendar.
Who is it?
USADA. A USADA DCO will notify you of your selection for testing.
Okay.
Good morning. Are you Rachel Flagg?
Yes, I am.
Good morning, Rachel. My name is Richard Brooks. I'm a doping control officer with USADA.
Oh, okay. Nice to meet you.
You will be given a doping control official record. Read the statements, sign, and print your name. You will be asked to provide a photo ID, and you have the right to have a representative with you. The DCO or chaperone will keep you in direct observation until you are ready to provide a sample.
No. I think I'm ready to go. Okay.
When you feel you are ready to provide at least 90 milliliters, or approximately 1/3 cup of urine, choose your collection vessel and inspect it carefully.
And then just check the pack and make sure there's no holes or tears.
Proceed to the toilet area with the doping control officer or witnessing chaperone. Rinse your hands with water before opening your container. Witnessing of the sample is an important reality of drug testing. A qualified doping control officer or witnessing chaperone of the same gender will directly observe you as you provide your urine sample. Once there, you will need to push long sleeves up above the elbow and reveal your mid-torso to mid-thigh area. The doping control officer or witnessing chaperone must have a clear view so they can view the provision of the sample. This is another step to help eliminate cheating. Once you have provided your sample, secure the lid on the container and go to the location where the DCO has set up your processing station. Make sure that you maintain control of your urine sample until it is sealed and secured in the sample collection bottles. There are several steps for processing your urine sample, and the order may vary. Select a kit and make sure that the tamper-evident tape is intact. Ensure that the kit numbers on the bottles, lids, and styrofoam box are all the same. The DCO will give instructions for how to distribute your urine sample. Once you have secured the lids on the sample, the DCO may handle the bottles to check the security of the lids and to ensure that the bottles don't leak. The DCO will check the specific gravity of the residual urine in the collection container to ensure that the sample is within the required ranges for the lab to test.
So 7. Would you like to take a look as well?
At this point, the DCO will ask about any dietary supplements, medications, substances and methods taken or used, and any or current therapeutic use exemptions on file, and record it on the Doping Control Official Record. The DCO will then complete the Doping Control Official Record and review it with you and your representative if present. Everyone signs the form after review. You will receive a copy of the Doping Control Official Record and the supplementary report form if used. Your name is not included on the copy sent to the lab. Your responsibility is to comply with the process. However, if there are any irregularities during this process, or if something does not seem right, you should discuss it with the DCO and report it to USADA.
Okay, awesome.
All right, Rachel, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you. Have a good day. Bye.
Okay, so we just saw how tests is conducted, how a sample is being collected. It's quite difficult to get away with that. You see how they've asked a person is constantly monitoring the athlete while he or she prepares to, give away the sample. So that's how a sample is collected. So the other question which arises is how to avoid doping. How can a man, how can an athlete avoid doping? This is something which morally, it should be affecting you. Careful with supplements. You should be really careful with your supplements whenever you're approaching an event, a sporting event. You should be highly careful of what your intakes are rather than going for steroids, hormones. It's always better to stick to the normal best diet. Self-realization that drugs can end your career. It really can. I mean, if you the best example that I can think of is none other than Lance Armstrong, the cycling legend, the ace. He was stripped of seven of his world titles. The Tour de France that he's quite famous for. Uh, he was at the top of his time when it all happened, and when it all happened, just imagine the reaction, the fans' reaction, the disappointment that he gave to millions of people across the globe. That was something which is no matter how good he was in his sport, at the end of the day, with that incident, like he has lost all his respect in front of the society. He has lost all his endorsements which he had, like all the brands ended their contract with him because of the bad name that he had because of usage of drugs. So you have to think about what consequences are if you end up being caught, or you should know that it's morally incorrect. That's morally wrong to do such activities, such to get involved in drugs while too involved in doping. Change to a healthier lifestyle. As I said before, it's always better to have a healthier lifestyle than trying to improve your physical condition or try to improve your performance with alternatives, just like by doping and using of drugs. And as you all know, it should be a fair game. The sport is a fair game to all, right? It'll be completely not even, like it'll not do any sort of a justification if you're using drugs, and then the other athletes who are very honest, who are playing with their heart and soul out, if they end up on the losing side, it's not their fault, it's just your fault, just because you use drugs you won. Taking it just as a sport and not taking it personally, as we have spoken before. Most of these athletes, they have this pressure coming in from their coach, from the nation, from their huge fan following, that they want their players to win. Yes, everybody wants their team to win, but not at the cost of being a corrupt sportsman. I mean, sports is all about sportsmanship. I think that as long as you are right in your path, as long as you keep your character clean, you're eventually a sportsman. Like, just even if you end up on the losing side, you are correct. Ethics behind doping. What are the ethics behind doping? Like, I know the worst way of losing dignity, I would say. I mean, the complete respect is gone in a minute, and it is practically impossible to gain that respect back again in front of the society when you're accused of drugs and doping in terms of sports is concerned. A cheat in front of the society, yes, as I just mentioned. You're no longer an honest sportsman. You are no longer a sportsman. You're being suspended. I mean, I know there's this fair trial, couple of years in prison. A lot of you're stripped off your titles. You have to think about what your family would be going through. It was really not hard for it was really hard for Lance Armstrong when he had to go through all that. He had to take all the critical, all the critiques and all the negative comments from the media, from the people, from the entire fan base that he all had. Now, I don't think anybody would remember him for his good deeds. Everybody would be just talking about his bad deeds, about his doping scandal that happened. Not just cheating yourselves, but also against athletes who play a fair game. People who have been honest about their game, they end up on the losing side because you won because of the fact that you used drugs to enhance your performance. That is something which is also to be taken care of, to be considered of. Like that is I mean, that's like stealing somebody else's property. That is like stealing a medal, stealing a trophy which you personally did not worth it. I mean, you were not worthy of doing that, but still you rather decided to steal it off from somebody else who was actually worth it. And injustice to innocent athletes, we just talked about that. So with this, I would like to end my presentation. I know my presentation was quite short, and I tried my best to give an informative presentation on doping in sports. I hope you enjoyed my presentation, and please do leave comments, and I would be really grateful to answer them back. Thank you so much.